It was a sunny afternoon in a small, quiet town where life moved at its usual pace. On the corner of Main Street, an ambitious young girl named Maya had set up a bright yellow lemonade stand. She wasn't just selling drinks, she was raising money to help her mom with some unexpected bills. Maya was only 12, but her heart was as big as her dreams. As customers came and went, something unexpected happened that turned a simple afternoon into a moment the town would never forget. Officer Bradley, the local police chief known for his strict and often controversial ways, pulled up in his patrol car. He stepped out with an intimidating presence that silenced the bustling street. "What do we have here?" he said, towering over Maya's small stand. "You got a permit for this?" His tone was sharp, his intentions clear. He wasn't there for lemonade, he was there to make a statement. Maya froze, confused and scared, as onlookers began to gather. Before she could explain, Officer Bradley decided to take matters into his own hands. What he didn't realize, though, was that Maya wasn't just any girl. Her dad was someone who could change the entire trajectory of what was about to unfold. The crowd grew restless, and whispers spread like wildfire. Who was Maya's father, and what would happen next? Stay tuned to see how one bold move would expose the truth and shake the town to its core. The tension in the air was thick as Maya stood helplessly behind her lemonade stand. Her small hands clutched the edges of the table, trembling under the weight of the police chief's intimidating glare. People in the crowd began murmuring, their eyes darting between Maya and Officer Bradley. Most of them had seen this side of him before, strict, unforgiving, and sometimes unfair. But today felt different. Today, the target was a child. Maya tried to explain, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm just trying to help my mom," she began, but Officer Bradley cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Rules are rules," he said gruffly. "No permit, no business. Pack it up or I'll have to take you in." The crowd gasped, a mix of disbelief and outrage rippling through the gathering. Maya's best friend, Aaliyah, stood frozen nearby, her face pale. "You can't do this," she finally blurted out. "She's just a kid." But Officer Bradley wasn't listening. He was too busy asserting his authority, his badge glinting in the sunlight like a symbol of unchecked power. As he reached for the stand to shut it down, a voice boomed from the back of the crowd, deep, commanding, and full of quiet anger. "Stop right there." Heads turned, and a tall figure emerged from the sea of onlookers. His presence alone seemed to shift the mood. Some people whispered his name in awe, while others stood in stunned silence. Maya's eyes lit up with a mix of relief and fear as she recognized him instantly. Her dad had arrived, and it was clear he wasn't just any ordinary man. The crowd parted like a wave as Maya's father stepped forward, his calm yet commanding presence silencing even the murmurs. Dressed sharply in a tailored suit, he looked out of place in this tense, chaotic scene, but his expression was anything but relaxed. He glanced at Maya, her frightened eyes locking with his, before turning his attention to Officer Bradley. "Is this how you protect and serve?" he asked, his voice steady but sharp enough to cut through the tension. "By intimidating a child for selling lemonade." Officer Bradley stiffened, his authority suddenly feeling challenged. "Sir, this isn't about intimidation. It's about following the law," he replied defensively, though his voice faltered just slightly under the man's piercing gaze. The crowd, now fully invested, began whispering louder. "That's David Carter," one man murmured to another. "You know, the civil rights lawyer. The one who's always on the news." David's reputation preceded him. He wasn't just Maya's father. He was a well-known advocate for justice, someone who had taken on powerful institutions and won. This wasn't just another parent standing up for their child. This was a man who knew the law better than anyone else in the town, and he wasn't about to let this slide. Maya's dad stepped closer to Bradley. "Did you know the law also protects children trying to make an honest living?" he asked, his tone firm. "Or does that only apply to certain kids in this town?" The crowd shifted uneasily, some nodding in agreement while others looked at Officer Bradley with newfound scrutiny. For the first time, he seemed unsure of himself, but he wasn't ready to back down just yet. "With all due respect, Mr. Carter, I'm just doing my job." David's jaw tightened, and the tension in the air grew thicker. Everyone could feel it. This wasn't over. The crowd grew restless, their whispers turning into murmurs of agreement and discontent. Maya stood silently, her small frame dwarfed by the growing tension between her father and Officer Bradley. David Carter's calm exterior masked a brewing storm as he took a step closer to the police chief. "If you're just doing your job, then why does it always seem to target people like us?" David asked, his voice calm but laced with steel. "You're shutting down a little girl's lemonade stand while real problems in this town go ignored. Is this how you define justice?" Bradley's face reddened, the weight of the crowd's judgment bearing down on him. He glanced around, realizing for the first time that he was losing control of the situation. "This isn't about race," he snapped. "It's about the rules. Nobody's above the law, not even your daughter." David's eyes narrowed. "And yet you seem to enforce those rules selectively. Tell me, Chief, when was the last time you shut down a bake sale in the nicer neighborhoods? Or does your sense of the law stop where privilege begins?" The crowd erupted in murmurs, the truth of David's words hitting home for many. Bradley shifted uncomfortably, but before he could respond, a voice rang out from the back. "That's enough." All heads turned to see the mayor approaching, her expression a mix of concern and authority. Dressed in a crisp blazer, she quickly assessed the scene. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice carrying over the murmurs. David turned to her, his frustration evident. "Your police chief is harassing my daughter for selling lemonade," he said. "And now we're all waiting to see if you're going to let him continue." The tension reached its peak as the mayor hesitated, caught between the weight of public opinion and the undeniable conflict before her. All eyes were on her now, waiting for her next move, while Maya clung to her father's side, her heart pounding in her chest. The mayor's hesitation sent a ripple through the crowd. She glanced at Maya, her innocent eyes brimming with tears, and then at Officer Bradley, whose stance had shifted from authoritative to defensive. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, a man in a crisp suit stepped forward from the edge of the gathering. His appearance was sharp, professional, and out of place for the casual small-town scene. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth but loud enough to command attention. "I'm looking for David Carter." David turned, his eyes narrowing. "That would be me." "And you are." The man pulled out a sleek leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a badge. "Agent Collins, FBI," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. The crowd gasped in unison, their attention immediately shifting to the unexpected arrival. "I believe there's more to this situation than meets the eye." Officer Bradley's face turned pale as Agent Collins stepped past him and toward David. "We've been monitoring a series of incidents involving discriminatory law enforcement practices in this town," he continued, his gaze shifting to the chief. "And it seems this might be a prime example." The crowd erupted in whispers, their earlier murmurs now fully voiced concerns. Bradley opened his mouth to protest, but Collins held up a hand. "Not another word, Chief. We'll be reviewing your actions very carefully." David looked at Collins, then at Maya, whose confusion had turned to cautious hope. The mayor, caught entirely off guard, stumbled for words. "Agent Collins, I wasn't aware of any investigation. You are now, Collins replied bluntly, and I suggest you start preparing some answers. The stakes had just skyrocketed, and for the first time, it wasn't only about Maya's lemonade stand. The crowd fell silent, every eye fixed on the unfolding drama. Maya clung to her father's side, her small hands gripping his arm as Agent Collins's presence shifted the power dynamic entirely. Officer Bradley's face was flushed, beads of sweat forming on his brow as the weight of scrutiny bore down on him. David, ever composed, turned to Agent Collins. "I'm glad to hear someone's finally paying attention," he said. "But what happens now? Is justice going to be served, or is this just another empty promise?" Collins gave a tight-lipped smile. "Justice is why I'm here," he replied. "Chief Bradley, you'll need to come with me. There are multiple complaints against you, and we'll be conducting a full investigation." The crowd erupted in a mix of gasps and murmurs. Bradley's jaw tightened, but he didn't resist as Collins gestured toward his car. "This isn't over," the chief muttered under his breath, though his bravado had all but disappeared. As Collins escorted Bradley away, the mayor stepped forward, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice trembling, "I deeply regret what happened today. I'll ensure the town's policies are reviewed to prevent anything like this from happening again." David nodded, though his eyes held a spark of caution. "Words are a start," he said. "Action is what matters." Just as the crowd began to disperse, another man approached David, a local journalist holding a microphone. "Mr. Carter, one question," he said quickly. "What inspired you to fight so hard today?" David glanced down at Maya, who now wore a small, hopeful smile. "Because when my daughter stands up for what's right," he said, "I'll always stand with her." As father and daughter walked away, the whispers of the crowd faded, but one lingering question hung in the air. How deep did the corruption go? And who else might soon face the truth? The crowd slowly dispersed, but the events of the day left a mark on everyone who witnessed it. Maya packed up her lemonade stand with her dad's help, her small hands still shaking from the encounter. "I didn't mean to cause so much trouble," she said softly. David knelt beside her, his voice calm and reassuring. "You didn't cause trouble, Maya. You stood for something good, and when people try to stop that, it's their problem, not yours." The mayor approached them again, her tone more genuine this time. "Maya," she said with a small smile, "I'd like to personally approve your lemonade stand. You won't need a permit anymore." Maya's face lit up, and for the first time that day, she smiled fully. Over the following weeks, the town began to change. The investigation into Officer Bradley revealed a pattern of biased enforcement, and he was removed from his position. The mayor followed through on her promise to review the town's policies, ensuring fairness for everyone moving forward. Maya's lemonade stand became a symbol of resilience, drawing customers from across the community. It wasn't just about selling lemonade anymore. It was about hope, unity, and standing up for what's right. As David watched Maya proudly serve her customers, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. "You've taught this town a lesson, kiddo," he said, ruffling her hair. Maya grinned up at him. "I had a pretty good teacher." And with that, the two shared a laugh as the sun set over the small town, leaving behind the warmth of a community that had finally started to heal.